This is Book Club. Brought to you by Graydon and Chase. Made specially for Blake Swab.
We are here today with John Krakauer.
Thank you for having me.
We are here to talk about your novel, Into the Wild, but first we'd like to learn more about you.
Okay, let's continue with your questions.
Where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, Massachusetts.
Other than Into the Wild, which of your books would you recommend us to read?
I really like Under the Banner of Heaven and Into Thin Air.
So why are you into writing nonfiction?
As a child, my father introduced me to mountaineering, and I've loved the wilderness since then. This love for nature influenced me to write about my own stories of being in the nature and others that I hear about.
Wow, I never knew that about you. Can you give us a summary of Into the Wild in one or two sentences?
It's a recollection of Chris McCandless' struggle to find himself, in which he ran from home to one of the only untouched places left on earth to try and make his life the one he idolized as a child.
What do you mean, life he idolized?
He grew up loving the outdoors like me, but he was even more into the fictional part about it, of surviving. He grew up loving the outdoors like me, but he was even more into the fictional part of surviving in the outdoors without any help, just off the wilderness. And he always wanted to be like that.
One thing that caught my eye while reading Into the Wild was you were able to connect with Chris because you had the same interests as a kid.
That is true. I was able to view from his mindset of what he was thinking when he was running away, because I also had that mindset as a kid. We were both reckless teenagers who wanted to take nature on.
You mentioned his struggle earlier. Do you know why he fell into it?
There's no known reason, but I found issues like family issues that he had. And when he was young, he saw that his father had an affair, which, as I mentioned in the book, because he wanted to live with nature, and then once he figured out that he had his affair, it just messed up the reality that he had, and he wanted to go into living in the nature.
How did he run away and where to?
After graduating from Emory, he donated all the funds he had, burned his identification papers, and disappeared. He took his Datsun and traveled west to California.
I thought he went to Alaska. Did he not go immediately?
That's right. First he went to Lake Mead in Nevada, where his car got totaled because of a flash flood. He then went on a chase across the southwest part of North America, first hitchhiking his way to California, where he met the Burrs, the family that he connected with. He then canoed to Mexico, then back to Arizona, and then he finally moved back to California to hang out with the Burrs, and then he finally went to Alaska.
How did he make it all the way from California to Alaska?
First he set up camp outside Salt Lake City, where he met Franz, a veteran who he connected with. Franz agreed to drive him up to Colorado, where he hitchhiked his way from there to Alaska.
What did he do once he made it to Alaska?
Once he made it to Alaska, he wandered until he found an abandoned bus, which he shortly made home. He hunted for his food until he sadly died of starvation due to sickness from rotting potatoes.
That's terrible. Did you hear that Richard Miller used Into the Wild as an example in his essay, Writing in the End of the World?
I saw that and I really enjoyed reading it.
Do you have any ideas as to what point Miller is trying to prove by writing this?
Miller's trying to prove that writing and reading aren't perfect. He starts out by talking about Columbine shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, and how they were thought to be outsiders and two boys who couldn't tell their alcohol-fueled dreams from reality. He then goes on to express that they weren't actually that different. They read like all of us, they wrote like all of us, and it just there was no impact that writing had on them, which is, most people think that writing is a way for kids to get their stress and stuff out.
Why did Miller include you in this essay?
I think he included the story about Chris to illustrate how literature doesn't magically make life meaningful. Chris tried to surround himself with books and literature that he wanted to be a part of, trying to make his life into that, which failed. And then that shows how, even though he thought so highly of this, he couldn't actually achieve it.
Please go on.
He also chose it because I was able to identify with Chris so well. Because Chris and I had the same interests as children, he believes that I was able to connect with what motivated him to run away. We both fell in love with the same authors who wrote stories showing an unloving beauty that could only be shown through books. He states, Cracker is using McCann Bliss as a vehicle for making sense of his own turbulent and occasionally self-destructive youth. And then, although Chris was so in love with fiction that he wanted it to be reality, he was unable to truly find meaning through it. Miller states, McCann Bliss actually believed that he could escape the corporized world because books told him so. He sees Chris as a prime example of someone who believes fiction too much. Chris was so enthralled by Jack London's Stories About Life in Alaska, one of the books that we both loved as children. But he overlooked the fact that Jack only stayed there for one winter and died in his early 40s. He failed to look for the relationship between what the author says and what the author lives. This fatal error made Chris believe that he was able to survive in Alaska, although he couldn't. He thought that if he was able to follow London's fiction, it would bring meaning to his reality. He then states how because I was able to find the details about his father's affair, I was able to provide the readers with a glimpse of why Chris made his unlikable reality into one he was tricked into thinking was real. His father's affair pushed him into finding a reality that he would enjoy being.
Well, that concludes our review. I really appreciate you being here to speak with me today.
Thank you.